Welcome. Today on Book Talk with Bookish Erika, I am interviewing author Claudia Filusch. Claudia, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me and for this opportunity. I'm feeling very excited about all of this.
Good. I'm excited to chat with you today about Echo's End, your debut novel. So, what inspired you to write this sci-fi fantasy horror novel?
I've been writing for many years now. Though at first it was poetry or shorter work, such as short stories. And I even had a short story published in 2022, but I pulled that pretty quickly from the shelves after
Oh,
publication. Between the years of 2020 and early 2024, I was in a long distance relationship. And during that time, my life narrowed down to pretty much just working and being online. So after the separation, I suddenly had all of this free time again, and I returned to writing and being creative, also as a way to kind of reclaim myself. And around the same time, I went to see Dune and Dune Part 2 in a double feature with a friend.
oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, it was fun. It was fun. I think we were there for like 4 or 5 hours, but it
They're
was really
long
fun.
movies. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It was so much fun though. And watching it, I was just so inspired and motivated. I mean, I was struck by the visuals, by the atmosphere, and the immersive world building too. It just felt so cinematic. So that experience definitely sparked something in me. And I knew that I wanted to create a story that carried the same kind of intensity. And that's pretty much how Echoes End was born. Yeah.
I love that. And actually, when I first saw the cover for Echo's End, it did kind of remind me of the vibe of Dune. Obviously, very
Yeah.
different style, but it's such a beautiful cover.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't have an actual author copy with me because I gave my last one to my mom, but I do have the book here. It's
Oh,
the
it's
proof.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's the proof copy, but I'm really happy with how it turned out for sure. I just wanted to have someone on the cover to put a focus on a character, you know. The character on the cover is Jira. She's one of the main protagonists in the story, so it was really nice to just have one of my characters on the cover. Yeah.
I love character covers, so I'm always really happy to see them. I feel like it kind of brings me more into the world. So it's
Yeah, for sure.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So how long did it go, or how long did it take you to go from the initial idea of Echo's End to actually publishing the book?
That's a very good question. So, Echoes End really took shape after I saw the Dune double feature. It completely reshaped the story's direction. So at first, I wasn't outlining at all. I was just writing freely, letting my emotions guide the plot, as a way of processing everything in my life at that time. So I actually began outlining and drafting more seriously around, I'd say, March 17th last year, 2024. But around that time, I also met my partner. So I stepped back briefly to focus on this new relationship.
Hmm.
Um, However, once I realized how much he supports what I'm doing, you know, writing in general, being creative, I came back to the project with even more motivation, with even more determination, knowing that I have that kind of support. Um, we are both very
Amazing.
creative. I mean, most of the time he's sitting at his desk in the living room painting his miniatures because he paints Warhammer
Oh,
miniatures.
yep. Yeah, very
Yeah.
cool.
And then yeah. And then usually most of the time I'm just like sitting in the living room at the coffee table right beside him and we just do our stuff, you know. We both do our creative stuff and encourage each other and support each other. So, going back to the project, I was finished with the manuscript, I think around December. Then the editing process continued, and then the full manuscript was ready by May this year. And then I published on June 21st. So it took just over a year from series outlining to the release of it. Yeah.
That's amazing. And I love to hear how supportive your partner is. I think that makes all the difference in the world, especially for something creative, because if you're not in the right mental space, then that can just completely kill any creativity. So I'm glad you have
Absolutely. Yeah.
someone who is supportive and you can support his Warhammer figurines and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love that. And that probably really helped kind of spur that creativity and get you published fairly quickly. I mean, for
Yeah.
creating a whole world, you obviously did a very good job and you published that pretty fast. So that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of time off work because I only work part-time, which is 20 hours a week in my case. So
Mhm.
usually I have between 3 or 4 days off work. And that time I pretty much always used to do something productive or creative in that sense. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. It can be difficult to, when you have time off, to really keep a good schedule. But obviously you're managing your time really well. So congrats on that, because a lot of people
Thank
struggle
you.
with time management.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, looking back at your first story idea versus your latest work, what's one surprising way you've changed as a writer that even your past self wouldn't recognize?
I love answering this question. It really made me think for a minute and reflect on this entire journey so far. I think what's most interesting is that Echo Zen it began as a straightforward sci-fi fantasy story, but it quickly transformed into a duology, and it's threaded with horror. For example, body horror. The sequel, the second book of the duology, will touch up on themes such as dismemberment and trauma and all of these things, all of these elements that I never imagined myself writing. So it surprised me how naturally those darker themes kind of emerged. And people often say, you don't write the book or you don't write the story, the characters do. And while that rings true for me as well, I've realized that my world building has just as much power in shaping the tone and the themes of my book, which I was also surprised by because I didn't think that I was going to put so much emphasis on complex world building, you know? Um, in my current project, which is also going to be a duology again, I guess that's just my thing now. Echo Zen started as a standalone. It turned into a duology. Same with my next project. It's a gothic horror novella, and the other one leans more towards being a dark fantasy when it comes to the genre. And they have gone even further. Like it turned out way darker and more unsettling than I expected. But I think that's because writing consistently every day, it opened the door for me to express my trauma and my buried emotions. So that intensity just shows in my work, I think. So I guess you could say that even my past self wouldn't recognize how far into the shadows my writing is going at the moment.
What an interesting look at your writing. I think that is just
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. And I love books that have rich world building. I think that can make or break a story for me. And so the fact that you have put so much emphasis on this world building and that did shape the darkness and just the themes of the story, that's really cool to hear. So I love to hear
I'm glad.
that. What do you hope that readers take away from reading your book?
That is also a very good question. I could give a very long answer to that, but to just keep it sweet and short, I hope readers take away the idea that beauty and horror often exist side by side, that even in broken and terrifying worlds, people are capable of things like love, sacrifice, and especially resilience as well. So I do want readers to wrestle with the darker themes, but I also want them to feel the flicker of hope running beneath it all. I think ultimately that's the biggest thing I want readers to take away from the book.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment. And I think nowadays the world can just be so exhausting and dark on its own. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
us do read for that hope or for that little bit of lightness. And so I think that that coming through in your novel, even though it's set in a darker world, darker themes, I think that is just an absolutely beautiful message that readers will take away. So I love that. That's so cool. You actually speak five languages, and English is your third language. So why did you choose to write Echoes End in English?
I love answering that question. I was hoping that you were going to ask something like that,
Oh, good.
honestly. Yeah. So I chose to write Echoes End in English because for many, many years now, it's the language that I think, write, and mostly speak in. I read books in English, I watch movies in English, and I interact online almost entirely in English. So it
Oh, wow.
comes far more naturally to me than even my native German sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, Growing up with my family, with my parents, I grew up speaking German and Polish. So German is my
Oh,
native language, and Polish is my second language. And now living with my partner, I only speak English because he's American. Um,
oh, okay.
yeah. I do sometimes have to translate, German to English, English to German when my parents come visit us or when we go visit my parents. So that can be a bit challenging sometimes, just quickly switching between languages like that.
I don't think
Um,
people recognize how much of a skill that is. If you haven't practiced or learned other languages and you haven't had to do that, people really underestimate how difficult that is. So props to you because I've been in that
thank you.
situation and it is not
Yeah.
easy to do.
No, it definitely isn't easy, but I think it also depends on the language that you learn. I mean, I've found it easier to, for example, learn Spanish than I found learning French, for example. There's differences in grammar, in vocabulary, there's different rules. But there's so many words in German and in English that are very similar to each other. So that was also why I picked up English so quickly, I think. I don't have any family in the US, the UK, or any other country in which English is spoken as a native language. I just learned it in school. Um, and I actually had an English teacher in school, and he believed in my skills and pushed me to do better because my grades were just horrible at first. That was due to me not participating, and I kind of didn't care. But those teacher-student conversations that you have, and when it was my turn, he told me, "I know you can do this. Why aren't you doing it?" So
Yeah.
his encouragement, yeah, yeah. So his encouragement made English my favorite subject alongside art. And after I graduated, after my A levels, I also studied English literature and linguistics very briefly at university. So
Very
writing
cool.
in English just feels, yeah. So writing in English just feels instinctive. It's the language where I guess my creativity flows most freely, you could say. Yeah.
I like that. That's such an interesting answer to that question. And I think a lot of Americans were not known for learning other languages. And so I think that that's probably going to be a very interesting answer for them, just because that's not a situation that a lot of people have found themselves in,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate. More people should learn languages.
It's
But
fun. You should learn more languages. It is
it is
fun.
fun. Yes, I've studied a couple over the years. I'm not fluent in anything else, unfortunately. But I love to.
But you know some things, right? Like,
I do, yes, yeah.
there you
And
go.
when I'm when I travel, if so I have learned some German, I've learned some French, I've learned some Russian. But when I travel, it does come back a lot quicker. It's
Yeah, for sure.
just
Yeah.
unfortunately no one around me speaks those languages, and so it's difficult to
Yeah.
practice. Obviously, I could try harder to find people to practice with, but yeah. So, anyways, that's so interesting. It's very interesting that you also mostly think in English now. That's really
Yeah.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
But being surrounded by it so much, that makes sense. So how does knowing all of these other languages influence your writing style then?
I think that languages carry emotions very differently. So, for example, in German, words can feel heavy and precise. In English, they can seem more fluid and expansive. And then in others, for example, French, the language can feel more lyrical or sharp. So I think moving between those languages just lets me tap into different emotional tones in my writing. For example, it adds layers to how I express a scene or when I describe a character's state of mind. So I think that's a big advantage in that case. However, on the practical side, it can also make self-editing very tricky. For example, I have been made aware of a spelling mistake in Echo's End, and the word is resource. Now, the funny thing about the word resource is it's almost exactly identical in German as it is in English. And the only difference is that in German, it has an extra S. So there's a double S in there.
Mm.
And little differences, little mistakes like that can slip through. So it definitely makes editing harder. It makes it a challenge, but I think overall it's definitely a blessing. Just overall being multilingual, it just deepens the way that I use language, I think. Yeah.
I think definitely it would. And a lot of people don't realize that not every word or phrase is directly translated into other languages. And
Yeah.
so a phrase will be, the meaning might be the same, but you don't translate word for word on most things. And so I think being able to know all of these different languages, it really does broaden your vocabulary in multiple languages just because you're forced to phrase things differently. And then you'll think
Yeah.
that phrase differently when you think of it in English or maybe in Spanish, you know. And so I think that
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
really does give you a much richer way that you write and speak. So I think that's really
Yeah.
cool. I love languages. I'm a geek about languages, so I could talk about them all day with you.
Me too. Me too. Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of fun. So you are quite busy and you're working on a few writing projects at the same time. What themes do you find yourself repeatedly exploring in your work?
I absolutely adore this question. Um, I think I'm fascinated by transformation, which is both physical and emotional. You know, characters being remade by trauma, by choice, or maybe even by forces larger than themselves. And that might take the form of, like I've mentioned previously, body horror, or it might be a quieter internal unraveling. But it's definitely a theme that I can't seem to escape. I also often write about contrast. So, hope and despair, beauty and horror, love and violence. So my worlds are definitely dark when it comes to the overall theme of them. But there's almost always a thread of humanity or connection running through those stories. So, like I've mentioned previously, my stories, they've become a way for me to process those buried emotions that I have. And they often circle around loss, survival, the search of meaning in the aftermath of destruction. And in the past couple years, or especially the past year, I've made my fair share of, themes like grief and loss. So it just helps me process everything that I've been going through recently. And ultimately, I keep coming back to the question, what do we hold on to when everything else has fallen apart? So that is definitely something that I keep coming back to. for sure.
What a fascinating, fascinating answer to that question. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that in your works because everyone experiences grief, everyone experiences loss and hardship, and we all deal with it in very different ways. But for me, I
Yeah.
love seeing those things reflected in books because I do go to books for a lot of my emotional outlet, I
Hmm.
guess.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I think that will draw a lot of people is yes, there is a lot of darkness in our lives, but how do we process that? How do we move on? Where can we find that little flicker of hope, like you were saying?
Hmm.
And so I think that's going to really draw a lot of readers in for sure. So switching gears a little bit, this is a very hot topic right now. How do you feel about readers tagging you in reviews of your book?
This is a tricky question, simply for the reason because every author has their own preferences in that case. Some people only want to be tagged in positive reviews, other authors don't want to be tagged at all. And both these preferences are completely valid.
Mhm.
Personally, I think that being tagged in reviews, good or bad, shouldn't be necessary. Sharing opinions about a book is absolutely important and welcomed. It helps authors to get their book out there, to have people notice their works, whether the opinion or the review in that case is shared on personal platforms or in dedicated review spaces. But at the same time, we can't forget that authors are human, and some of us actually avoid reviews to protect our peace. Because even respectful criticism can spark doubt or hurt sometimes. And unfortunately, not all reviews are respectful. And I believe no author should feel obligated to see or engage with reviews, and that choice should be respected. Because as soon as you tag an author on, for example, Threads, they get a notification. They're like, oh, okay, what is this? Let me check this out. And then they're automatically going to read through it. So there's no real possibility of avoiding it. Personally, at this point, I avoid Goodreads, for example, because I'm a very anxious person, and I'm already quite doubtful of my work and of myself sometimes. So I just personally don't want to take that risk. So for me personally, I think I fall into the category of if it's a bad review, please don't tag me so I don't have to read it and see it. If it's a good review, please let me know because it'll boost my confidence for sure.
And I think that's perfectly valid. Like you were saying, whatever an author decides, I'm totally fine with that. We should respect their choices. Um, but a lot of authors are moving towards just please don't tag me at all because
Yeah, yeah,
some people they might think their review is positive or I've heard the excuse of, oh, well, I said some positive things and some
yeah,
negative
mhm,
things in the review and the author's like, yeah, but I don't want to hear the negative, which is totally valid.
yeah, yeah.
Like I would feel the exact same way. um but yeah,
I
so
think,
I oh, sorry, I didn't mean
yeah.
to cut you off.
No, 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 I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think it's reviews are so subjective, as is everything in art. One person loves it, one person hates it. And I think it's the same with reviews themselves. Someone can read a review, and the thing that you maybe criticized is something someone else will love. So we even pick up reviews in different ways. I read through a review, and it could be so bad reading through it for one person, like, this is terrible. But I could be like, you know what? I think this is actually a pretty good review. So
Mhm.
it's very subjective, liking, disliking the book in itself, but also the reviews. So it's a tricky topic for sure.
It's definitely tricky. One thing that I've started doing is when I post my review on social media, then I
Mhm.
do list things that I think people would like about that book. And even
Mhm.
if it's not necessarily a theme that I loved, I still include that. And I don't do like a star rating, but I just say, hey, these
Yeah.
were the main things that I picked up on. And like you were saying, someone might be looking for a book that has that theme or that aspect or that trope. And even though it
Yeah.
might not be my favorite, it could be their favorite. And so I've
Hmm.
started just highlighting like the themes that stood out, the characters, maybe character growth, things like that. And then hopefully that helps find the right readers for that book.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but it's definitely tricky just managing, and as I'm sure as an author, you've put your heart and your soul into something and just seeing it find the wrong reader. I'm not going to say it's ever a bad
Yeah,
book, but
yeah,
finding the wrong reader, that could definitely be
yeah.
very heartbreaking. Oh,
It's all part of the process though, so you know.
yeah. Unfortunately, it is.
That's fine. It's okay.
Yeah. How do you deal with author burnout?
Uh, that is a good question because I'm actually just coming out of like that burnout phase. When I feel a burnout coming on, I usually just let myself do absolutely nothing. I might go out with a friend, or I spend time with my partner or with family, or I kind of like try and de-stress by playing video games. I also love watching murder documentaries. I just have to mention that right now. I'm a
They're a
big
lot of
fan of
fun. I'm a
documentaries,
fan.
yes, and true crime in general. I love it.
Yep.
Um, I just don't panic or worry about burnout anymore. At first, I was like, oh no, I'm not being productive. I'm not being creative. I'm falling behind, but my mindset definitely shifted because I know that I've already been giving my absolute best. So reaching the point of burnout is pretty much just a sign of how much I've worked, of how much progress I've made. So resting doesn't feel like a setback anymore. It's part of the process and it's important. It's a very important part of the process. So once I've recharged, I can return to my writing, feeling refueled, feeling more energetic and ready. Because if you don't feel good, you don't write good. So it's definitely important to take breaks regularly.
Yes, definitely. What a good answer. And I like that you kind of put a positive spin on, like, once you've reached the burnout, you've already given it all that you can. And so
Yeah,
you have to give yourself that grace, give yourself the allowance to relax. It's crucial for any sort of artistic, creative endeavor. I really think that we need to remember you have to recharge, you have to get in the right mindset and, just be feeling
absolutely.
good. Like you were saying, like you have to feel good because if not, that will be reflected because
Yeah,
art and writing is so personal. So
that's
I
true.
think,
That's true. Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad to hear that you've learned to accept it.
Yeah, thankfully.
Yeah. And one thing that I've realized is crucial for authors is forming friendships with other authors. You need someone who can understand what you're going through and who can support you. And what are the best ways you have found to form these bonds?
I have actually made a lot of connections and also friendships via threads. When I started my author journey, I knew nothing and no one. I didn't know anyone else who was writing. I knew nothing about how to do things. So I published being a bit scared and a little bit alone. But since then, I've made so many friends who are also authors or readers themselves. And, we talk about all kinds of things. We share character art before we post it. We ramble about current projects. We give each other updates. And we're also being vulnerable because it's very important to have someone you can talk to who can relate on those things that you're going through. We exchange advice, we support each other, and we show up for one another. So having those friendships has made this entire journey so much richer and less lonely. Just knowing that others are going through similar, if not the exact same ups and downs, has been incredibly grounding for me. It just makes a huge positive difference for my nervous system as well. Again, being anxious. So I'm just very grateful for all the connections I've made, and most of them came from threads. Yeah.
Threads is amazing. I have found so many new authors on there, new books, new like reader friends. And
Yeah.
if I see an author or a reader, but who's not on Threads, I'm like, you have to use it because for
Yeah.
some reason, I feel like people interact so differently on there. And I think they're much more willing to reach out to someone and actually chat with someone rather than just like a quick post and move on. And so
Yeah,
I'm really
absolutely.
happy to hear that. Yeah, because I found you through Threads, and most of the authors who
Yeah.
I've interviewed, I've found through
Yeah.
Threads. And so it's so cool. I love it. It's a fun platform for sure.
Me too. It's very easy to connect for sure. It's
Mhm.
one of those social media platforms that really feel social. You know what I mean? So,
Yes,
yeah.
for sure, which I love. So this is an interesting question, I think. What
Mhm.
are you most proud of in your author career?
There's many different things that I'm proud of, in general. I mean, I thought of a story, I wrote the book, I did everything from creating it to marketing it to publishing it. So that's definitely something that I'm proud of. However, I think the most proud moment that I've had so far, is being able to share my work with my parents. My mom, she is very expressive with her feelings. My dad, however, he's this like laid back man, the
Mm-hmm.
relaxed kind of person. But when I showed them my book, when I showed them my proof copy, seeing my dad proudly taking a picture of my book and my mom talking about it to the family, it was such a special moment. I love my parents more than anything. They've been nothing but supportive of every life decision I've made so far. And just being able to say, hey, mom, hey, dad, I wrote and published a book, and there's many more to come, was just the best feeling ever. So this achievement, me writing and publishing books, it's not about just making myself proud. It's also about giving them a reason to be proud of me. Not that they're not proud of me, but this is just a little like, hey, I did this. So that was
Yeah.
my highlight so far. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. I think that's such a sweet like experience that you shared with us. And I'm happy. I'm sure they are proud of you no matter what. But like you said, this is just one more thing to be proud of. And so I think
Yes.
that's really, really cool. And I'm glad that
Yeah.
they were so receptive and that you have such a good relationship with your parents. I think that's
Oh yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so if someone wanted to start reading Echo's End, what
Mhm.
formats is it available in and where can they find it?
So Echo's End is currently only available on Amazon, but it is available as ebook, as paperback, and it's also on Kindle Unlimited. So there's a few ways on how to read it, which is nice, especially if you just want to kind of look into it before getting a paperback. It's very nice that it's on Kindle Unlimited. With that being said, I actually have a little surprise here with me.
Oh,
I
yay.
have the proof copy of the
Ah,
sequel of book two, of the duology. So if you want to read Echo's End, you have more than enough time to do so, just in time for Ashes Rise to come out, because this will be released on January 7th next year. So there's plenty of time to catch up.
perfect. So, readers, if you're listening or watching, start Echoes End now. That way, you're all caught up. You're ready beginning of January to start the sequel. Oh, I'm really excited for you. You have a second book publishing soon. That is such an
I know.
accomplishment.
I'm so excited as well. I can't wait.
Good. Oh, well, Claudia, this was so much fun. Thank you for joining me today. I just had so much fun discussing you and your debut novel, Echoes End.
Thank you so much for having me again. It was a lot of fun.